Bubbly water.
All right, what is up, everybody? We just had a bubbly water conversation, but we are diving into the 2025 rookie mock draft. We're going to be talking about 3 rounds today, so we're going live on YouTube and Twitter if you're still on that app. But on the podcast, we appreciate you guys listening. I know our main source of listeners are out there, so we wanted to go live early on Saturday just to get you guys kind of an idea of where rookie drafts could go. We're going mock draft, so this isn't necessarily kind of our rankings. This is just kind of how we did it first run through. If there's any bad picks, that's Jay's fault, right? And I'm also, man, this is just bad producing. I am not Jay Stein. So when you're looking at any of the bad picks here, that's where you have Jay here. Jay got the second overall pick, so he's all the evens. I'm the odds as we go through here. But we're going to be talking about a bunch of different stuff. We got projections already, kind of looking at the rookie projections. We got our favorite landing spots. We're going to talk about tiers. We're going to go into and talk about kind of where we have our tiers are. And we did have some early picks here because this is an early kind of mock. It's a 12-team super flex. We'll say it's 1.5 tight end premium. But it's interesting to see how the board's kind of shaken out. We went 3 rounds, and then we're also going to talk about the 4th round. So we didn't pick the 4th round, but we are going to talk about guys that kind of didn't get drafted that we could see as being some late round dart throws. Next week, we'll probably go on a little bit more player profile centric guys that we really like as we go through here. So stick with us while the intro is going, and then we will talk to you guys about the first round on the other side of it. All right, so here's how we mock the first. So we're going to go through here. We are live on YouTube. I know I saw some comments out there. Drop them in there. What do you think of this as we kind of go through it? Going through here at the 101, this is my pick. I took Ashton Jeanty, who went to the Raiders. At 102, we have Ted McMillan going to the Carolina Panthers, and which is funny because we got a lot of hate about where we had Ted beginning of this whole process. We kind of had him at 101, 102. Lo and behold, that's generally speaking kind of what we're seeing out there. Kind of. We have 103 at Amari Hampton going to the Chargers in their first round. 104, we have Cam Ward going to the Tennessee Titans. 105, we have Travis Hunter, Jacksonville Jaguars, and who, by all accounts, looks like he's playing wide receiver, like for the majority of his snaps. So that's positive. 106, Colson Loveland, which could be one of those like picks, like what the hell are these guys doing? 107, Travion Henderson going to the Patriots. I love the talent. I love that he got early day two capital. And shout out because we were getting mocked on that one too. You remember we put him in our top like 7 or 8 picks at the beginning of this whole process. And people were saying, it's too high for Travion. Look at this now. Then we have Emeka Egbuka at 108. He went to Tampa Bay, which is kind of a gross landing spot. 109, Quinshon Judkins goes to the Browns. 110, Luther Burden. That was Jay's pick. We're going to get into that. Not yet, but we'll get into the early Luther Burden love. 111, Tyler Warren, and 112, Matthew Golden going to the Green Bay Packers. So let's just talk about 102 because we know Ashton Jeanty in a majority of leagues, almost all of them, is going to go 101. The tier, I think, is 102 to 105. I always said that was going to be the tier. It's kind of turned out to be that tier there. So who do you have? So you picked Ted. But what do you think about that 102 spot? Who could go there? What's that looking like in terms of like leagues out there? Do you think Omar and Hampton can jump up there or Cam Ward based on the quarterback need? Where are we at with that 102?
I think for me, when we went through the pre-draft process, I think I was switching Ashton Jeanty and Ted McMillan. I think now it's solidified Ashton Jeanty 1.01. What is tough for me is here, I think at 1.02, it can really depend on sort of your league settings. So if you're in a Superflex league with, 12, 14, 16 teams and you need the quarterback, I can understand taking a Cam Ward here. I can also understand taking Amari Hampton here. I do think that he is just one notch below Ashton Jeanty, but a very, very good prospect as well. And then I personally think that Tedro McMillan is almost as good as a prospect as Ashton Jeanty. And I really do love the landing spot there with Bryce Young. Bryce Young started to come on at the end of the year, and there's not much in the terms of what's there in terms of the wide receiver course for the Carolina Panthers. So I really do think this is a situation where Tedro McMillan can come in, be the number one right off the bat, really, really help out Bryce Young, and hopefully get up into that wide receiver one type of discussion. So top 12 wide receivers. Now, what I think is really cool is Mike Clay's out there, with his projections, and he was doing these kind of as the draft was going. So you could go out and see kind of what the projections were. Now, he has Ted McMillan for 195 total fantasy points over 15 games. So it works out to be about 13 fantasy points per game. That is not as high as what he's projecting for Omari and Hampton, or for Cam Ward. All the quarterbacks, depending on the games, are somewhere around 14, 15 points per game, depending on how many games you think they're going to start. But I do think that the discussion is really, really interesting there, because last year when we were kind of discussing, the prospects of 2024, you had high end wide receivers, and then you had sort of lower end quality prospects at the quarterback. So I'm talking about Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., those type of guys at quarterback, and then you had guys like Brian Thomas Jr., even Malik Neighbors, some of these guys. Xavier Worthy, some of these guys at the wide receiver position. And I think you have to have that discussion about what do you value. For me, Ted McMillan is in that high end tier 1 type of prospect. So I think of him in the same lights of how I thought of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. And I think of Cam Ward in a sort of the lower tier. So all of my quarterbacks are in the tier 3 category. So I don't have any tier 1 or tier 2 this year. So I think this year is a little bit different, and there's pressure because we all play in the super flex leagues. We all think every year you trade for those picks to get that QB, and this year I just think the quality of QBs, even though you had one go first overall, is not as high as maybe some of the quality players that you can get in a Ted McMillan or Omari Hampton. So for me, fine. If you want Omari and Hampton at 1.02, that's fine with me. But the next guy for me is Ted McMillan, and then Cam Ward is maybe that 4th or 5th guy in the sort of how I would rank those guys.
So here's what I'm saying about this group. So the 102 to 105, I think you make a good point about all those guys. When you look at Tet, we're going through our Dynasty rankings right now. I just updated him as we go. So I updated him today. He's at wide receiver 13 for me. So I have him at wide receiver 13. So I have him right between Jackson Smith-Majiga and T. Higgins. And you could probably flip those two if you wanted to. I have Nico sitting right out there, Drake London. Drake London's at wide receiver 10 finally, right? But Tet could be Drake London at the end of this year. I think he can move into the top 10, like especially with all the I don't even want to say vacated targets, because there was really no one was earning those targets in Carolina in that wide receiver room. So you have all those targets available there. I think 13 is kind of low for the projections based on what we've seen just in general. And so like 102 for Tet is a smash to me if he can be a top 10 wide receiver, which he's almost there, in my opinion, from a dynasty value perspective. I'd have to imagine he's around wide receiver 13 and 14 for most. Like I think he's in that category there. Some might be at wide receiver 15. I think that's where Jay's at right now. So like in that range, that's fine, but he could be Drake London sooner, right? The issue with Drake London was kind of the quarterback issue, maybe the depth chart issue, maybe all of those things combined. I don't think Ted has that. I think Ted is in a great offense. Dave Canal is going to do those type of things. He's going to scheme him up those touches there. To me, the 102 comes down to 2 guys. It's either him or Hampton, right? So I think the question mark to me is when you look at Hampton, I think he nailed the spot, right? The Chargers, absolutely awesome. He's going to be a hard ball. We know what that offense is going to look like. He's going to get the touches. Najee Harris is there. You can eat into him a little bit this year. Like there's going to be some eating work in there. But overall, moving forward, Hampton is, I think, compete with Ashton Genty after this year. I think that the expectation you should have for him is to be a top 5 back. I think he could be a top 5 back in that system. So those 2 picks to me come down to, like you said, roster construction, need, those type of things. But maybe I'm wrong in terms of the tier. Maybe it is 102 to 10. Maybe it's 102, 103 tier, right? Unless you want to put the quarterback in there. And that's really where it comes down to. But the quarterback discussion for me is an interesting one, because we were just going through our rankings pre-show too. I was looking at it and so I have Cam at QB 25 combined. So we still have some Devy guys in there. So if I take out the Devy players, well, it's just Arch. I just have Arch ahead of him. So he's at QB 24 for me overall. For me, like Cam, I don't see a ton of movement there. I think he can be in that 17 to 24 range, right? And I'm a little lower on a couple guys, like, and I know that, but like he's probably Brock Purdy, who I have at QB 17. Like there's a very big tier there, right? And I think the only guy you might be able to say is like, why is he behind Darnold, which could be a very valid point. Maybe I'm a little higher on Darnold, but he's right next to Darnold. He's the next pick after that. Michael Penix Jr., Tua, Bryce. But I think right now, who would you rather have right now, Bryce or Cam Ward?
Bryce.
Me too. So like I'm okay with that evaluation or valuation of him right now too. So like to me, that's why Cam, he's a low floor player, man. We've talked about this. We've said that. Like to me, I don't know if I want to move him, and I'd rather move the 104 for a quarterback. If I can get Baker Mayfield with all those weapons, Bo Nix maybe. I don't know. Like that's a hard one. You and me hate Bo Nix, but I do want to give him a shot every once in a while. Dak, give me JJ plus an asset, right? If somebody's really like high on Cam Ward, but I can get JJ for something, like to me in that tier is where I want to move it. If I need a quarterback, I don't feel comfortable drafting Cam Ward. That's just where I'm at with Cam Ward, though. I could be completely wrong. That's happened millions of times before. But that's just kind of how I feel about him there, where I would love the upside. Like, I didn't take Cam in this mock. I took Travis Hunter. I would have taken Travis Hunter at 104. Like, that's who I would have drafted, too. So that's where I'm really at with those 5 guys there. Where are you at with Travis?
Travis is first of all, I would say that it's awesome to see the Jags jump up. We had a discussion pre-draft about the Browns taking him. I think that the Jags taking him puts him in a much more advantageous spot. So I really like that landing spot. You get I think Mike Clay has him projections for 194 fantasy points over 15 games. Obviously, the wide receiver 2 behind Brian Thomas Jr. But I really think that this is a situation where you got a new coach there in Jacksonville. You got Trevor Lawrence, who, you know, for all that he's been touted, the number 1 overall pick. He's really kind of a value out there right now because he's fallen down quite a bit. It's really hard to get people to try and buy in Trevor Lawrence, and I think what we have right now is a unique or a different situation than what we had before. You got Brian Thomas Jr., who came on really, really good last year, and now you got another incredible playmaker in Travis Hunter. So I think that this is a really good situation, a stock up for Trevor Lawrence, but also I think what we always advocated for was that we wanted Travis Hunter to fall to a place where he was going to play primarily offense. So that helps us from a fantasy perspective. So we know he's going to play a lot of offense on this team. And then second, we wanted a place where he didn't have to be the alpha number 1 guy, or at least they could split, you know, part of it. They have somebody, and they have a really, really good wide receiver there in Brian Thomas Jr. So, and then you have a sufficient, or if not, maybe a quarterback that takes a step up this year. I think this is a really good setup for Travis Hunter to do fairly well this year. So I like the landing spot. I think that the landing spot is so much better than catching passes from whatever of the 5 quarterbacks that the Browns have right now. In that type of situation, I think that this Jacksonville landing spot is really, really good.
No, and we wanted a quarterback, right? We were always worried about the quarterback with Hunter, and we said who the Browns going to be throwing the football to. I'll take Trevor Lawrence, and when Trevor Lawrence was good is when he had those 2 big guys on the outside, like T. Higgins, Justin Ross at Clemson. Now he's got Brian Thomas Jr., Hunter. Like, that's what you want to see there. All right, let's move on to the next tier. So we have Colson Loveland. People are upset about our Colson Loveland pick here, our Emeka Ibuka pick, and then Matthew Golden, they say, is too low. So, but before we get any of that, let's go to Luther Burden. So let's go there. So I talked to Jay about this, and, I'm very comfortable with Luther Burden in the early second. 110 is a little high for me, but his sheets are telling him something else. So his spreadsheets, his golden spreadsheets out there, this is why we have Jay here, is telling him 110 is okay. What are we thinking about that Bears landing spot? So obviously they drafted Loveland. They got Burden. Now they have a Dunze there. They have DJ Moore possibly. I don't know what they're going to do there. Where are you at with Luther Burden?
Yeah, so I look at Luther Burden as a really, really good wide receiver prospect. He's my wide receiver 2 in this class, even with the draft capital switch up there. So, if your expectations for draft capital were in the first round, And then as you got closer and closer to the draft, you started to see that fall a little bit for Luther Burden. And then that obviously played out in the draft. Now, this we're playing fantasy here. I get it. You got Loveland and Burden in an offense that already had DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. So this is a really hard offense to see where all of these fantasy points are going to come from. But we're also playing Dynasty, so it's not just 1 year out. We're playing many years here. We're trying to play 3 years out, type of thing.
Hey, don't tell that to all the managers out there orphaning their leagues after a year, Jay. Don't tell them that. That's the problem right now with Dynasty. But go on. I interrupted you.
That does happen, and I've always been an advocate where I want to draft the talent over the situation. Now, we have our Discord. I've been raving about what the Chicago Bears did in this draft, drafting Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. I love these two guys, and I think this is the future of the Bears. If you look at kind of the way that the Bears depth chart sort of shakes out, you got DJ Moore and Rome Odunze on the outside. You had Olame Zakauskas, who was kind of projected to be the slot receiver. And then you had Cole Kmet at tight end. And now you slot in Luther Burden for potentially that slot receiver. And Colston Loveland jumps up into that tight end position. They addressed the offensive line, and then you got the number 1 overall pick from last year's draft in Caleb Williams. This is going to be a really, really good offense. Now, whether it all works out this year from a fantasy perspective, assuming they keep all these guys, sure, there's going to be some weeks where this is not going to work out from a fantasy perspective. But what I'd say is you fix the offensive line, you have tremendous threats at wide receiver and pass catchers, and then you add Ben Johnson to the mix. This is really, really interesting. And I can understand how you'd want to pick other guys here. But I'm looking at the 3-year dynasty window here, and I think Luther Burden being that slot wide receiver with Caleb Williams throwing the ball and Ben Johnson offense, I can see something that could be pretty special for Luther Burden, and for that matter, Colston Loveland going forward. I really do think that those two guys are really the future of what the Bears could be. And throw away fantasy for a second. This is going to be at a much improved offense. Yeah. This is the Bears doing something that's going to look special this year, competing in a really tough division. But this is offense. I want to bet on this offense because this looks really cool. Now you have the chance where DJ Moore, maybe over a couple of years, maybe you could envision him moving on or something like that. And then Luther Burden and Colston Loveland have a greater share of the offense, or lots of different situations. But I've always been an advocate for let's draft the talent, let's draft the players that did really well in college, and project to be really good prospects into the NFL, get drafted highly, and maybe go to good situations. This is not one of those situations where there's a whole bunch of volume up for grabs. But I think this could be a good offense situation where everybody eats, and maybe the total gets a little bit bigger. The total pie.
So the way I looked at this, and we were talking about it in the Discord. I was talking about this a little bit. I look at Loveland as being a guy that I want to buy, and I'm looking at a high floor like type asset, right? Like I think that he'd be great. Laporta role on Ben Johnson's offense. You're going to hear that multiple times. That's nothing new, but I think that would fit him really well. And I kind of buying Odunze because I think he's the ceiling guy. Like I actually like Rome. I think he's the ceiling there. Jay's going to disagree, but I think Rome is the ceiling play in that offense where Luther is in the middle for me. I like Luther Burden. I think he'll be fine. I just have a hard time. Like if he's going at 110, that's the price I don't want to pay. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I still think Odunze is the ceiling play. Now, I don't think he's worth what people were paying for him earlier in the year. I mean, people were going crazy. 103, 104. I would have been more comfortable than 107, 108 range. But overall, just in general, like when you look at just kind of that offense, I'm okay with Odunze. I think that's a ceiling play there if they move on from DJ Moore. I like the idea of getting Loveland for a floor. Like that's kind of where I'm at with those guys. I don't want.
I,
Well, go
I see
ahead.
it the exact opposite. I think
Okay.
Burden is the ceiling play, and Dunze might struggle a little bit more because Burden might eat some of that.
Well, that's
So
why
just the opposites.
that's why we do this, because you can't agree on everything. It's good. I
Yeah,
mean, that's part of
yeah.
Dynasty. That's why you go out there and buy it. Other guys, I don't want to spend we have 2 more rounds to get through, so I don't want to spend
Yeah.
too much time around one. But any other landing spot you really like of this group?
You know, the comments that I make on the tight ends is yes, they went first round. You should not be expecting tremendous fantasy points per game from these guys. But I do think that you get tight end one production for these guys for a long time. So if that's how you view it, but if you're viewing for the tremendous upside, you probably won't get that year one. You don't get that from most tight ends year one, except for maybe Brock Bowers. But Colston Loveland, Mike Clay's got him projected 140 points over 15 games, so 9.3 fantasy points per game, and Tyler Warren 8.5 fantasy points per game. So if you're going through this list and you're looking at who maybe got the best odds or best shot at good fantasy points in the first year, it's not the tight ends. But I do still think that there's value in tight end premium leagues for securing those higher end tight ends. If they're mid tight end ones, if they're early tight end ones, if Colston Loveland ends up being as good as Trey McBride, you're going to feel really good about selecting him in the mid first or late first. But how long does it take to get him up to that level? That's kind of where we're thinking. It took Trey McBride a little bit of time to get up to that level. Not everybody is Brock Bowers. The other thing I'd mention is, there's some like Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Travis Hunter. But, one thing that surprised me after going through this process was Quinshon Judkins getting drafted as early as he did, moved him up my rankings a bit. And I really like the landing spot. It's interesting what the Browns are doing. They paired him with another back as well, kind of like how the Buckeyes had it last year with Judkins and Henderson. They have Judkins and Sampson, I believe, and then you also have Jerome Ford in there as well. So but I do think that Judkins is an interesting one from a points per game perspective. So they have him in there at 192 points over 14 games, so 13.7 fantasy points per game. That's interesting to me. Matthew Golden at 12.2 fantasy points per game, so 183 points over 15 games. That's interesting to me as well. The Packers wide receivers is a mystery, but spending first round draft capital on Matthew Golden, I'm not like I didn't think that Matthew Golden was my highest rated wide receiver, and he's still below some of these other wide receivers in the way I look at it. But there's certainly some potential there for this first round wide receiver to do well in that system, and I think that there's space for him there to do well. Just it wasn't a perfect prospect model, and that's why I don't have him bumped up as high as maybe like a Luther Burden, but he did do well in the combine. He's very athletic. There's lots of things to like about his profile. But the stuff that I look for, which is experience adjusted, age adjusted production over time, Matthew Golden wasn't as high as like a Luther Burden over that time.
Yeah, and when you look at the depth chart, when I was going through kind of Golden, when you're kind of going through, okay, where do you fit there? I heard a little bit of noise about like him and Jaden Reed, but those two guys, they complement each other well. Matthew Golden's a Christian Watson eraser. Like Christian Watson, he's already been a dead asset for a while, but Golden and Jaden Reed, and then probably Romeo Doubs or Savion Williams, depending on how that plays out, like that, they're very good. That's a very good compliment. I think if you get Matthew Golden late first, you'd be happy with that. I think the guy that I'm going to have so much damn Emeka Ibuka, and it's going to be disgusting because it's going to be a buy low, because it's just like with JSN, right? Jackson Spencer-Jigba. The fact that we waited, and then we saw that wide receiver, top 12 wide receiver type role there. I don't think that his immediate targets path, like I think that's blocked a little bit, right? He's not going to get that immediate targets, Evans and Godwin, but I do think that he could be a very fun play for 2026. We're talking about Mike Evans, a little older, right? And Emeka is much better than Jalen McMillan. And first round top 20 capital shows me that they didn't necessarily believe in Jalen McMillan there. And I think Godwin coming back off the injury, I mean, he's been injured a lot. I know he just got the contract, but we have seen the injury there. Evans has been injured too last year. And I think, to me, I think that he's going to kind of dip enough to where you might be able to get a Mekabuka second round. Like, there's probably some opportunities for you early second if he drops, if people are really worried about that landing spot. But I'm going to be buying, man. I'm just going to be overloaded with a Mecca probably over the summer, kind of getting in there, because they're going to look at this. And I think that he is their future wide receiver 1, right? And that's what you kind of have to look at in Dynasty. So to me, of these spots, I know that the Tampa Bay spot's not great and I don't love it, but it does present you a unique buying opportunity for a player that just got drafted top 20 in the NFL draft.
Yeah. I love that. And, I've been a Mekabuka truther for some time here. I am so happy that he got the really great draft capital. I really do. I think if you have some patience and you're able to wait through some of the low points, just like Jackson Smith and Jigba, I really do think that this is a really great landing spot. It just takes some time.
Yeah, and people are impatient.
Yeah, Mike Evans is almost 32.
32, yeah.
And Chris Godwin is, I think, 29 with some injuries. I really do think that this could be, just sort of securing up that wide receiver. And I do think this is one of the better, it's aging, but it's one of the better wide receiver rooms. So I do think this is a good thing for Baker Mayfield as well. But, from a positional perspective, I think just shaping up this first round, I think you have to go Ashton Genty. I think you have to go the next running back. I think you have to go is Omarion Hampton. I don't think you make any exceptions there, is how I see it. Then the next tier I have is Judkins, Caleb Johnson, and Travion Henderson. So no matter how you want to order it, however you feel there, if you're all on Travion Henderson and you want to take him 1.05 or 1.07 or whatever, fine. I could make a case for either one of these guys, Judkins, Johnson, or Travion Henderson in that next tier. So that would be my next group. In terms of wide receivers, I think you have to take Tet first. I know there's going to be a lot of like Travis Hunter should be wide receiver 1, or I really like Matthew Golden or whatever, but I think you got to pick Tet first. I think Tet's the number 1 there. And then the next tier for me is Burden, Hunter, Ibuka, and Golden. So, we might like argue about how you have those ordered, but I really think that if you pick any one of those guys, I understand it and I can make a case for any one of those guys next. So, just grab anybody in that tier. I like that tier. And for tight ends, I really do. I think Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren are in that first tier, but I think Colston Loveland, has to be the first one. I think in my model, he's just a gap a little bit above Tyler Warren, him being closer to the high end of the tier and Tyler Warren being closer to the low end of the tier, although they're the only two in that tier. So kind of looks weird, but just from a positional perspective, when you're in those buckets, that's fine. You can pick which one your favorite is, but I really do think that, Ashton Genty and Martin Hampton, and then those 3, Ted McMillan, and then pick from those 4 type of things.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, brother. I think Travion Henderson, though, we're not going to talk about him yet. Let's talk about it. I'm going to profile his ass next week because that's my guy, and I love where he went. I think that's a smash spot for him, so I'm excited to see that. All right, let's jump to round 2 because we can talk about round 1 all day, and I want to get into some other guys. So round 2, and again, this is a 12-team Superflex tight end premium. And hey, my boy Mason Taylor, Jay, look at his spot. Look at his capital. We love it. He was my tight end 3 going this whole process. I'm so excited for him, but I digress. Let me get into the first part of the second round here. So at 201, we have Jackson Dart. I don't know what the hell to do with Jackson Dart draft capital. So that is a hard one. He's at the Giants. He's a first-round guy. 201 might be a little low for some people in terms of a first-round quarterback in Superflex, but I don't know. It's hard for me to draft him even at 201. 202, Caleb Johnson going to the Steelers. 203 was Jaden Higgins going to the Texans. Jack Beck going to the Raiders, goes at 204. RJ Harvey going to the Broncos at 205. People love me some RJ Harvey. Like I just tweeted out something nonchalant. you guys yelled at me all night, and I had a migraine, so I didn't see it. I just hate to break it to you. I just said he's gonna get overdrafted. I'm okay with RJ Harvey at 205. I was seeing like 108, 109. Like that was my concern. So we'll get into that. But like, I do like RJ Harvey. I drafted him in this mock at 205. 206, Trey Harris going to the Chargers. Might have flipped that. I think I missed the Trey Harris was still there. 207, I had to take my guy Mason Taylor going to the Jets. 208, Harold Fannin Jr. Going to the Browns. Kyle Williams going to the Patriots at 209. 210, Pat Bryant going to the Broncos. 211, Cam Scatabo going to the Giants. That's our first round 4 guy, right? So that's where we're starting to get that day 3-ish capital, early day 3. And then 212 is Terrence Ferguson. So this is the round of the tight ends in this range here. But Jay, what is your takeaway from this second round? I mean, I know you love Caleb Johnson. You're probably smashed there with him. But what's your overall takeaway?
Jackson Dart is interesting. When I actually put him through my model in Cam Ward, Jackson Dart comes out slightly better than Cam Ward, even though Cam Ward is the first overall pick. I like his profile, but I don't love his profile. So I don't have any of these quarterbacks as tier 1 or tier 2. So I'm not like pounding the table on any of these guys, but I can understand why people would be interested in a first round Jackson Dart for the New York Giants. I don't think that Jackson Dart is going to be for sure not starting as a starter for the start of the season. So you're in one of those situations where he's not starting to start off the season. So how many games is he going to be playing in that first year? That didn't seem to be too much of a problem for Michael Penix, who went in the first round, sat for some time, and then eventually made his way in. And so Michael Penix was able to keep some of that value. But, we're not talking about, early QB2 type value. This is like back end QB2, mid QB2 range. And that's kind of like where you see where Jackson Dart could end up. And, Mike Clay has him at 161 points over 11 games. So he has him playing 11 games for 14.6 fantasy points per game. When you're talking about positional values in Superflex, the QBs are interesting. They're going to be interesting. I understand that. I'm fading the QBs in this year and have been throughout this draft cycle. But Jackson Dart is interesting. Let's say he falls to the mid seconds or, nobody really wants him. That's an interesting upside type of play for somebody that could be a starter and looks fairly good from a numbers perspective throughout his career. So I think the Superflex QB of Jackson Dart is pretty interesting. Caleb Johnson, I really like the Caleb Johnson landing spot. I think this is a really interesting spot for the Steelers to grab him. He is a faller, so he fell out of my tier 2 into my tier 3, kind of flipped with Judkins just because of the draft capital aspect. But I've liked Caleb Johnson. I was worried that he was going to fall into that 4th round. But he didn't. He got the 3rd round with the Steelers, so I'm pretty happy. They got him there for 12.1 fantasy points per game. I think he's a more efficient runner, a better rush yards or expected runner than Najee Harris, and I think he could really thrive with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so I think I really like that landing spot. I like the fact that you can get him at 2.02 and you don't have to overpay for him. Earlier in the year, you were going to have to pay, 1.08, 1.09, 1.010, something like that. And now you can get him at 2.02. It's definitely cooled off on Caleb Johnson's season. And so I really like him. I think I have him up there with Judkins and Henderson. So getting him at 2.02 is really nice. Higgins, Betch, I really like those players. I have them in this tier 3 right behind Matthew Golden. And I have Harris there as well. I have it in that order. I really like the Betch landing spot. There's not a lot of competition there. We might talk about another deep sleeper as well, because there's really not much there except for Brock Bowers. So I think the landing spot for Betch is really nice. That kind of pushes him up a bit. And so, lots and lots of talk. I'll let you talk about some of your takeaways there.
So I think for one, I think the one guy I look in this room, if you're gonna get him late in the second, Kyle Williams going to New England when he went, like I wasn't. So the thing with Kyle, I wasn't like, I mean, we saw wide receiver 2. We were joking about that earlier in the year. Like we were saying that, but he landed himself in a great spot. I know he's a 5th-year kid, so I know the sheets don't like him too much. But he was productive the last 2 years, and he especially his last year at 1,000 yards on the 14 touchdowns. But he landed on a Patriots team that's desperate for a guy like him, right? Like when you're thinking of what they have there, I think Drake May is a reliable target per divider for this team, right? So when you're looking at just New England's weapons and what they have there, I absolutely love Kyle Williams being there. And I think if you can get a guy like him, I was trying to find that tier, right? Like in the back end of the second. And some people might think we have Pat Bryant too high at 210, which is totally fine. But you have to respect the draft capital a little bit. But if you're looking at that tier with like Williams, Bryant, Scatterbo, some of those wide receivers, I like the Kyle Williams tier. I think that when you're just going over what they have, Stephon Diggs is there. I think Mac Holland, yeah, whatever. I think Kyle, Stephon, and Demario Douglas, that's okay. I think Kyle Williams can kind of elevate himself into that role. And it would not shock me to see Kyle Williams down the stretch kind of lead this team in targets. Now, whether that's a great thing if you're a New England fan or not, like they didn't necessarily address their wide receiver room too much, but I do think down the stretch, not at the beginning of the year, I think maybe if he finds that role, he does well in camp. Getting a guy like that in the back end of the second is pretty good value there. And that's kind of where I look at these guys. Like I think Trey Harris going to the Chargers is a great spot for him. That's probably a tier to me. Like Jack Beck, Higgins, Trey Harris, that 206 mark. And then you're looking and we'll get in the third round here in a little bit. Then you're looking though at some of these wide receivers, like, all right, who has the best opportunity to earn targets to kind of get you some fantasy points? Because usually what you usually see is after 206, there's a drop off, and I do think so. I still think there's some kind of a drop off here. Like you're still getting 4th round running backs, right? You're still getting tight ends that we like. I like Mason Taylor. I know Jay likes Terrence Ferguson going to the Rams. Those are great spots where they went to, but is that production going to be enough, right? Or you're going to have to hold and stash, which is possible, which always happens in these drafts. So I think 206 is the tier for me right now. If the board was to shake up like this, and I understand that the board might not shake up like that in everybody's leagues, but I do like Kyle Williams. That's the one that stood out to me a lot just in this back end of the second.
Yeah. 5th-year guy, a little bit lower on my board, but I love the pairing with Drake May. And there's certainly opportunity if he can get in front of Demario Douglas, I think that could be a pretty interesting spot. And I love being tied to Drake May. I'm a really huge Drake May fan, so I think that's a great pick there. But I do agree that
I need to know what your take on RJ is.
I do agree that 206 is right after Trey Harris there. That's kind of close. You might include Mason Taylor and Harold Fanning depending on like how you think about tight ends or not. But Harold Fanning, I'm not sure, didn't get that great of a landing spot from my perspective. So RJ Harvey and Cam Scatterbo, those guys I'm going to be much lower on just because they're 6-year guys. RJ Harvey took the biggest jump for me in terms of tiers. And so him getting that drafted that high to a place in Denver where there's plenty of opportunity is interesting. Mm-hmm. But is it worth 1.09, 1.010, the back end of the first? To me, that's not something I want to bet on, but that doesn't mean that in his first year that he is not going off and putting up pretty good numbers. And so, say he gets 14 fantasy points per game, 15 fantasy points per game, you would feel really good if you got him in the early second or mid second there. I just historically have not bet it hasn't worked off very often that 6-year guys, and I'm lumping Scatterbo in here as well. I'm not saying that they were not very productive in their 6th year, because you go and you just look at the 6th year, it's awesome. There's lots of things that you can pick out that are great. Even throughout their career, there are some moments and things to pick out on both of these guys. But historically, I appreciate the players that, and I weight that in the process. The players that break out earlier tend to have a better odds at performing well in the NFL. And RJ Harvey and Scadaboo, it took them 6 years to get there. And so then how many, running backs do have a useful life. How many years are you going to get out of them when they're there? And then, are they replaceable at some point because of age, or, are they going to keep adding to the rooms type of thing? That's what I'd say. But I understand the process of why you would have RJ Harvey higher here. I just, in my opinion, I just like the prospects of Jaden Higgins, Jack Betch, Trey Harris. Even Trey Harris is a bit older. And that's why, I probably would have gotten Harvey there at 2.05 as well, maybe in front of Trey Harris as well. But that's kind of where it is for me from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like I do not want Harvey first round Harvey. Like that's not where I want. Second round Harvey. And to your point, here's my counterpoint to this. I think with running backs, to me, it's what can they do for you this year? Like I'm not really drafting guys at running back position with the outlook of dynasty in this range, right? So I'm looking at Harvey. He can get plugged and play and be running back one this year. Okay, I could take that. I'll take that production, and if I need to re-roll next year in the second round, I'll just do it, right? Scadabo, same thing. And I think you like Harvey because of draft capital. Scadabo is a tough one because I'm never been that high on him, but it's interesting looking at Tyrone Tracy and what they can do. Tracy's probably going to be more your receiving threat. I think he's going to be more that scat back type, whereas Scadabo maybe can be that, that 1B red zone level of production. And really, both of these guys, and this is where you get into it, are an injury away from being probably a low-end running back one possibly every week. Because if Tyrone goes down, Scadabo's their guy. If Estime goes down, Harvey's going to get a ton of that usage. Yep. I don't but here's the other thing too with Harvey. I don't love Sean Payton's way he plays running backs all the time. Like there is like a you get in the doghouse early thing with Sean Payton where the usage isn't always great in those areas, where I think the Giants really will lean on Scadabo. And I trust, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but I do trust the offensive play calling for the Giants from a usage perspective to be a little bit more consistent in that room that I do with the Broncos. But who knows? Who knows how that plays out. I do also want to point out, if you want to wait on tight end, it's okay because of the tight ends that are here, like Mason Taylor, a Fannin, a Terrence Ferguson. Those guys, those are very good options too. Like if you don't want to reach up for Loveland and Warren, or maybe it's not a tight end premium league and you're okay with going after these guys, I think it's a very good strategy, especially with some of the talent that was on that board in the first round. So that's my final thought of the second round. You got anything else before we go to third?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate, you got to respect draft capital. For me, draft capital is first round QBs, and then day one or day two, so rounds 1 through 3 for running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And I do think historically, if you are able to get draft capital, historically that does raise your odds at maybe attaining some decent fantasy, being fantasy relevant in the future. And so I do think we do have to respect some of those players that do get into that got drafted in the third round, like the Pat Bryant, some of these other guys. We'll see a couple of more of those in round 3. But I just think you do have to respect that, and they might not be set up or in the perfect situation to play or compete right away. But I do think that's a lot of the times if you're going to invest that as a team, if you're going to invest that much capital into a player at that type of position, then that means something. And that does say that, eventually you might get more opportunities and more shots because they believe in you. They want you on the team. They want you on that squad. So like in the instance of Pat Bryant, who knows how long Cortland Sutton is there, or how all these wide receivers play out. But could Pat Bryant be viable or be used this season? Possibly. That's interesting. But, what is it over the long term as well, given that he's a third round wide receiver?
Yeah, no, and I think that is Pat Bryant. Pat Bryant he wasn't one of my guys. I liked him. I just think he was one of those guys that sneaky, just scores touchdowns, kind of a gamer, right? Not the spreadsheet kind of guy, but the film guy. Like does a lot of things. And I love that he went to a guy like Peyton who loves those type of receivers, right? And if they do see him as being a Sutton replacement, hey, yeah, I mean that you have to kind of trust that there. I know they love Devon. I always pronounce his last name wrong. Vele. I always pronounce that wrong. Don't come after me in the comments. Like I know I don't pronounce that right, but I see they really like those big, tall wide receivers. I mean, Peyton was starting to go on a rant talking about him as being the next Michael Thomas. There was some Michael Thomas love in there too. So you have to understand what this offensive system likes there. Yeah. All right, let's go to round 3. So here's our round 3. We're going to go into 4 rounds. The 4th round, we're just going to talk about guys that maybe are on the board. Bashaw Tootin at 301. He's going to Jacksonville Jaguars. Elijah Arroyo going to Seahawks. 303 is Tyler Shuck, New Orleans Saints quarterback. I finally just took him because I cannot let a quarterback that got drafted that high go into that late of the 3rd round, because I do think he might start this year. And you might look at it being like he might give you more production than Jackson Dart year 1. It's still disgusting. And I actually call him Tyler Suck in the text messages today on accident. Kind of got auto-corrected to my boy Jay and Christian when we were talking about the rookie guide. But that's at 303. 304, Jaquez Hunter going to the Rams, which is a fun spot. 305 is Woody Marks, Houston Texans. Elegant Manor going 306, Titans. We were very down on him, and the NFL seems to have shown us that we were right. Shamari Dyke going to the Tennessee Titans at 307. 308, Jalen Royals going to the Chiefs, because why not? Why not just ruin our dreams for the Jalen Royals draft capital? Dylan Sampson, Cleveland Browns going at 309. 310 is Jalen Noel. 311, Shador Sanders snuck in there. And 312, Ty Felton, my guy Ty Felton. I told y'all he was getting day 2 capital. Me and Joey talked about this guy as being a sleeper. And I don't know who it was. I don't know what smart ass it was on YouTube. But I remember they left a comment and they said, is Ty Felton even getting drafted? Well, look at that, sir. He got day 2 capital, which we love. But initial takeaways, Jay. You don't have to go through every player like you like to do. But what is your takeaway from this kind of round?
I think it's interesting what the Browns are going to do at quarterback. I know we didn't select Dylan Gabriel, but I think that we got Shador Sanders in here. Yeah, one of these Browns quarterbacks is going to start. Maybe multiple of them. I think that it might be worth like taking a shot on Gabriel at some point, and I think he didn't quite make it into round 3, but that's one that's interesting that might have or should have made it in here. Shuck is he is not very high in my process. Even if he was available, I'm not going to be drafting. That's why I kind of forced Kevin to draft him. But what I would say is, from a strategy perspective, there's some quarterbacks that might be starting that got drafted really, really late in the process. We're not drafted in the 1st round. And there is value to grab some of these quarterbacks, especially if you want to play that upside. So you grab him, he's a backup quarterback, and then who knows with the Saints, but and then he gets a chance to start, that value is going to increase quite a bit. So taking those 3rd round QB shots on guys that might start, yeah, of course we got to do that at some point. You definitely want some shots at that. So I completely understand taking shots on Chuck, taking shots on Gabriel, just not very good prospects. I don't foresee them being, fantasy relevant 5 years from now. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
There's some players that fell out of the day 2 piece. So like, I think it's interesting that I still selected Elik Eomanor here before guys like Jalen Knoll and Ty Felton. That's just the way that my spreadsheets and numbers came out based on those. Even though some of these guys actually got day 2 draft capital, taking a Elik who didn't get day 2 draft capital over those guys is sort of more of that upside shot. I think there's lots of opportunity there for the Titans, and him coming in with another wide receiver we're going to talk about here that maybe in the 4th round maybes. And then coming in with Cam Ward, I think there could be an opportunity for Elick. I know that there was some injury stuff that kind of pushed him down the board, so maybe that is okay. I think Jarquez Hunter is my other one that I'd point out that I took him a little bit higher than where you might see him typically go. I liked his profile. I think him going to the Rams, you do have Kyron Williams, you do have Blake Corum, which they just drafted last year, but they invested a decent amount here in Jarquez Hunter. And I think that he could be a guy that, you talk about when injuries happen or something like that. I think he could be a guy that gets in there and does well if and when the opportunity comes for him to play.
Yeah, no, I love I like Jarquez Hunter, brother. Like I like that
Yeah.
spot for him. Like I think, when you're looking at it, like I just did his, we're diving in our rookie guide right now. So I did basically I did his profile, and I was like, man, he can find himself into. I was a very down on Blake Corum last year. Like you knew this. Like I was not. I'm a Michigan guy through and through. That's my team. I love them. I watched them tear it up in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. But I was a big I don't see the Blake Corum love in the NFL. I just don't see it. I could see Jarquez Hunter kind of carving out a role. Like he's perfect for that system, wide zone gap scheme with McVay. He's got a ton of juice on that. He's automatically competing with Blake Corum. And I think the one thing I will say for everybody out there watching or listening on the pod, if you're looking for a running back in this late rounds, take a running back that already has running back 2 capabilities, right? He's on that depth chart, and you look at that depth chart and you say, I think he's better than the running back 2, then you take a shot on him. And I think he is better than Blake Corum as a running back prospect. As of right now, I would bank money. Jarquez Hunter, 1,200 yards in the SEC, the 8 touchdowns, the receiving ability there. I think he could be a big play guy. I think he's a better option from a receiving standpoint, from a pass blocking standpoint. Like he's a smash to me in the 3rd round. Like if you can get Jarquez Hunter in the 3rd round, I think you're excited about that. Just like Tootin, right? Bayshaw. Like if you can get Bayshaw there, again, him and Tank Bigsby could be their guys, right? After Etienne, maybe Etienne gets moved early. In Liam Cohen's system, sneaky long-term play there. Tank is the Thunder, Tootin is the Lightning, right? That's the profile. It fits perfectly there. These are the guys I like taking shots on, right? Look for those round 4 running backs who could be the depth chart guys, the running back 2 guys that have that particular role. So I think that's great. As far as the quarterbacks go, we didn't put Jalen Monroe on here, so we get a little laughed at a little bit. From a fantasy upside, I get it. Like I understand there. I put Shador there. He could be the starter for the Browns, and I know that he had his fall, but the Browns suck, guys, and they just make poor decisions. And at some point, I'm pretty sure Shador is going to start there, and I think he's serviceable enough, right? He's serviceable enough to kind of be that guy for them, and he won't be pretty. But if you can get him at 311 and he starts some games, you might be able to move him, right? This is all about value. So maybe some guys he has maybe down the stretch. Let's say he has 4 or 5 games. He looks really good. And we've seen that before where, he's going to be their QB1. Hey, I believe in him. I have the upside there. It's a gross pick. Don't get me wrong. Like you're not excited about it. But I think at the 311 for a quarterback that could possibly start, I'll take the shot. But I get the Milroe love too. He didn't make the board here. And maybe he should with Sam Darnold being there, right? They move Sam Howell. Like there's a possibility Monroe can start some games if Darnold gets injured and his rushing upside is there. So maybe that's the guy you pick in the 3rd.
Yeah, like I said, I'd say the same thing is that there's a bunch of quarterbacks that are in situations with shaky, quarterbacks as the starters in front of them. So whether it's Milroe, whether it's Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, whether it's many of these other guys, is it worth taking the shot on that upside of the starter or whatever going down or them out playing and getting the spot? That's where you get an incredible amount of value and it could really, really hit. So yeah, I do agree. Jalen Monroe, Dylan Gabriel, those would be the 2 that probably should have come around here or, somewhere in here, probably could have come off the board. And so I agree with those comments as well.
All right. Last thing that we're going to talk about, round 4. some guys out there that didn't get drafted that you could possibly do. I put on Milrow out there, guys, so like you guys can stop yelling at me there. But let me get through the four, just some. Isaac Tesla, however you say it, to the Lions. Savion Williams, the Packers. Jalen Monroe, Seahawks. Dante Thornton, which is like the total Raider pick. I absolutely love that for just the Raiders, just because it's speed, speed, speed. I don't know if he can catch, but it's all about speed out there. Arian Smith, speaking of guys that can't catch, that's, you know, when he got drafted by the Jets, which was a total reach, by the way. The funniest part of that whole thing was he got drafted and someone's like, man, he's got to fall in love with the jugs machine because he can't catch. That is not something you want to hear after you draft a prospect. Is like the first thing people say is like, well, he's okay, but he just can't catch if you're a wide receiver. Trevor Etienne goes to the Panthers, Gunnar Helm to the Titans, Jalen Lane to Commanders, Jordan Watkins and Jordan James goes to the 49ers, Jaden Blue to the Cowboys, DJ Giddens to the Colts. I think the most interesting one of this whole group, Aronde Gadsden to the Chargers, because the Chargers kind of needed that tight end. Aronde is an interesting one because he's probably a tweener, but they do have a legitimate tight end, Will Dissly, right? It's Dissly. 12-team personnel. He can be that inline guy where you have Aronde kind of split out wide with Herbert. Like, that's a fun one there. But of this list, does your Spidey sense tingle at all of any of these guys, or maybe someone not on the board?
Yeah, I feel like Gadsden could be one that, you know, could potentially squeeze his way into playing this year. I think Dante Thornton is also one that also could be squeeze his way into playing as well. So I think those two are interesting. A couple names that aren't on here, Devin Neal, Ollie Gordon, I think are interesting as well. But, you know, we're talking about fourth rounders. You're taking upside shots as best you can. So it's hard down here to get the right guys. Every once in a while you go situation. Yeah.
You want one? You want to hear one that I like?
Sure.
You're going to get mad at me because he's a 7th round guy, so you're going to really hate me. Brashard Smith, the Chiefs. I know it's a 7th round pick, but man, I love the fit like I do. And I didn't even put him on here because I'm an idiot. But like, man, he has a shot. Like, he can really put up 1,300 yards rushing last year. The Chiefs needed a running back, right? They didn't draft a guy until now. They got Isaiah Pacheco out there. Man, he could play a role. Like, I wouldn't mind taking a shot on Brashard Smith possibly in the 3rd round, late 3rd. Like, I think there's an avenue for him. I know he's a 7th round guy, and that's gross. Jay's going to just be disgusted by that. But I think from just a depth chart perspective, like, why can't Brashard Smith make some noise? Like, why can't he make some noise in that offense? And speed to the Chiefs is not something to just, you know, pass off, because they love their speedsters. They love guys like that. They can get in space. They've needed that. They need that quick out guy. They need that stuff. They can be pretty creative with him. So Brashard Smith still, he makes my Spidey senses tingle a little bit.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, I like Devin Neal and Ollie Gordon. Maybe even LaQuint Allen could be interesting depending on how that situation plays out there. And yeah, I of course I like Brashard Smith as well, but you know, he's much further down in the way that I look at it. But Devin Neal, Ollie Gordon, LaQuint Allen, those would be my like off the board type of guys that I go for.
This is when Jay gets upset. He doesn't like talking about these guys because he's not excited anymore.
They don't pop
on his tears.
Yeah, what I'd say is the odds of you getting fantasy relevant players here in the 4th round are really they're starting to get pretty low.
Jay, don't you remember him? Don't you? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that was amazing. That doesn't happen very often. Like, very, very minimally happens. So it's hard. Take the best player available. Take the guy that you feel like can increase in value. Think about positional values down here and stuff like that. But you know, if I could, I'd trade to try and get higher level draft picks than here.
All right. Well, that is our 3-round mock, plus the 4th round that we kind of threw in some guys here. In terms of what we're looking at, we want to get this out to you guys early, just so you can kind of get an idea of your rookie drafts. Obviously, we are not the end all be all people. But we like you guys to see kind of what we're doing. And I do want to plug this for our Discord and our Patreon, our Substack. We do have our rookie guide. So we were the originators of the rookie guide a few years ago at a company that shall not be named. We kind of started the rookie guide, and now that we're moving on, we did our own rookie guide, but we didn't do it at the beginning of the year like we used to do. We are doing it now, and we're going to have it out Monday. So we've been working on this thing all off season, but now we've been diving into it, and it's going to have a ton of stuff. So it's going to have rankings. It has kind of our overview of every position. It's phenomenal. It obviously has all the graphics that Christian makes. It has all the scouting reports for players, has Dynasty outlook for everybody, guys, has our rankings in it, even has articles, has rookie draft articles. It's going to have some undrafted free agent articles in there. We're also going into just a bunch of just strategy talk in there. So it's not just your mama's rookie rankings and this is, your scatter reports. It's got it all. And it's got Jay Stein's index. So we got to shout out Jay Stein, his index in there in terms of what he does. And you can get that on our Patreon. You can get that on our Substack, or you can buy it standalone as well. So that'll be coming out Monday. So everybody listen to the pod. If you listen to this a little early, Monday is when that pops off there. You can check it out in multiple places. If you're on YouTube, the link's below. You can find it there. But we're really excited about the rookie guide. Jay, any thoughts? You got to see the rookie guide, haven't you? So you've been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. I think this is some of the best. I mean, you and Christian have been doing some guides for some time now, and they look awesome. They're always fun to read through. When you're going through your rookie drafts, you can just pop open to a player and kind of read about them and get an idea of who you should draft when you're on the clock. But what I'd say is that like the graphics that Christian does on these things, how it's all set up, there's a ton of just tremendous value that you don't necessarily see from all the rookie guides out there. That differentiates this, I think, from other rookie guides. So go and get it. You also get a little bit of a numbers flavor in there with my stuff as well, but I think it's definitely something that you probably want to go through your rookie drafts with. From a strategy perspective, from a rookie perspective, it's definitely worth what you have to pay for it.
Oh yeah, it's worth way more than that. But we like giving it away for the people for what we give it away for. So we appreciate you guys. We'll be back. Obviously, our podcast is weekly, but we'll be talking about rookies. We're gonna get into the rookies as always. I don't know what next week's show is gonna be. Probably rookie to dynasty value and assets. I like that show, kind of talking about kind of where these picks are going for, what players, and that's fun to kind of look at and see where you move, especially because we got the trade investor himself on the show. He doesn't tout himself like that anymore, but he is. So we appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys next week.